introduction, this is my quotes, main points, those are also quotes down there, and then last main points plus conclusion. In Texas Tribune, Swaby in 2019 stated this: last October, Texas education officials told landmarkers they would likely owe the federal government $33 million for illegally decreasing funding for kids with disabilities. There's always been a lack of funding in teachers for public school, but there was this bigger lack with disability kids. And so often parents will send their kids to these public schools, and then they'll come home and realize their kids are lacking resources. And teachers are often having to create these new ways in learning because they don't have the right equipment. And then kids that have disabilities associate public school in a negative way. And so parents are the rock for most of the disability kids. They are their biggest advocates. They take them to all their appointments. They rely on their parents. And so parents will send their kids to these public schools and then realize their students lacking in the education. And so in one of the articles in the Texas Tribune by Swaby in 2020, it's a parent's point of view, and it talks about how parents, what happens when they send their kids to public school. And so one of the parents stated that their kid is falling behind and is lacking important skills that they need. And so in public school for disability kids, they're learning their ABCs, their colors, how to tell the difference between red and blue, and just basic education that they need. And so teachers will realize that, parents will realize that the teachers don't have the right resources to provide these kids with everything they need. And so in the article, it continues to talk about what the biggest thing that the children are missing, and it talks about how in public schools they don't have a physical therapist or a speech therapist to help these students learn. And so I have a baby brother that has Down syndrome, and he's 4 years old. So I asked my mom what the biggest impact on his life was and what he was missing in public school, what his biggest public school impact was. And she told me that there's such a big lack in physical therapy, that there's no one there that has physical therapy. And so if you don't know what physical therapy is teaching the students daily function. So it teaches you how to eat, how to sit up, how to walk correctly, and how not to hurt your body in ways that we would have in ways that we wouldn't have necessarily hurt our bodies, but it's different for them, and they need someone to teach them this step by step. And so public schools, they don't have a physical therapist or a speech therapist to teach them sign language and how to communicate with other people when they can't talk. And so teachers and physical therapists, they aren't the same thing. Physical therapists, you have to go to school and you have to get your doctorate. Teachers are teaching them education based on their ABCs, how to pronounce words, everything we would learn in school. That's what the teachers are doing. And the teachers are with the students daily. They know what the students need. And so teachers are lacking resources, and so they have to come up with new ways on how to help their students. And so in Very Well Family, Loginson in 2020, they quote, "Remember, IDEA requires schools to provide an appropriate education, not the best possible service." And so these teachers, they don't get the budget money right away. They don't get to decide where the budget money goes. They just have to pick the cheapest option, not the best option. And that, with kids with disabilities, they need those best options. Especially with technology today, it would improve their learning by so much just by having these more expensive equipment, because in the long run, it's going to pay off for the student. And so teachers are having to come up with new ways and new possibilities to teach their students because they don't have the resources that they need. And so they also state in the article in the Very Well Family by Loginson in 2020, it states they also sometimes buy materials with their own money and use their own time studying to find better ways to help your child in the school in general. And they're talking about the teachers there. The teachers will often go and spend money on their classrooms or what they need for these students, but they can't go and splurge because, as we already know, public school teachers don't get paid a lot. And so the lack of the government's funding is putting an input in these teachers' lives because they're having to use their own money because what they want essentially is just the best for these students. And so with the lack of funding, it puts the teachers at risk too, because they have to open up and find creative ways and figure out ways around the system on how to provide for these disability students, because it's so important for them to have the right tools to learn, because without that they're not going to get what they need. And so kids often it's going to impact them the most, that the lack of public school is going to impact the kids the most. And so there's a study done by Millicent in 2006, and it's by Study Rockets. It was a study over Mexican American disability students, and it was a survey basically asking them what they thought about school and their opinions on it. And so the survey reported that the kids said they considered school negatively, in that in school they were often getting disrespected by their teachers, and overall teachers are very stressed, and there's a lack of teachers because there's not enough funding. And so you can have so many students but not enough teachers, which creates students to get stressed, and they probably might lash out, or they might say something in regards to the student that they don't necessarily mean, but in their situation they're stressed, and there's a lot going on for them because there's not additional help, and there's not funding for extra help for the teachers. And also students said that they will often get bullied by other students, because in public schools sometimes they will put them in an actual classroom, but since we're lacking a foundation of course learning for also just regular students, and teaching them how to interact with kids with disabilities, how to treat them the right way and not how to bully them, but overall it just gives this negative impact for students. And so our elementary and our junior high and our high school years, it is such a majority or a main part in our lives that it needs to be a positive reflection. And so with these disability kids, it's not. So now that you've learned about how it affects the parents and not realizing their student isn't getting the right resources, teachers having to pay out of their own pocket, and students having a negative effect, you realize that there is a lack in public school funding for these disability kids. And so I ask that you just take 1 minute and you put yourself in their shoes, and you think about all the different ways they could hurt your education if you didn't have the right resources and money. And so the next step is just finding these resources to help improve, because we want them to have the education that we were able to have and be able to learn and let their mind grow as much as it can.